Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the North and East Plans panel. My name is Councillor Caroline Gruen, and I will be chairing today's meeting. Could I remind everyone that today's meeting is being live streamed on the City Council YouTube channel so that the public can observe the meeting without needing to be present. North and East Plans panel deals with applications from the north, east and east of the city. The aim of the panel is to hear all the relevant information from applicants, members of the public and council officers to help members of the panel make their decision. So I'm now going to invite everybody around the table to introduce themselves. I already have done so. Councillor Caroline Gruen.
I am Stephen Wilkinson. I'm a principal planner and I am the case officer for this plan application. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Lisa Brannan, I'm Principal Engineer Highways.
Good afternoon, I'm Magda Lizama. I'm a Group Engineer in Flood Risk Management.
Afternoon, Robert Sanderson, Principal Engineer, Development Control and Flood Risk Management.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Kaylee Brooks, Little London and Woodhouse Ward.
Afternoon, I'm Councillor Nicole Sharp, Temple Newsham Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Morel Mitchell, Kippax and Methley Ward.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emma Flint, Councillor in Wheatwood Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Gower Almers from the Beeston and Albeck Ward.
Good afternoon, Daniel Lummer, Senior Technical Officer.
Good afternoon, everybody. Councillor Alan Lamb, representing Wetherby Ward.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Trish Smith and I represent the Pudgey Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Barry Anderson, Adlin Wharfdale Ward.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm the clerk today and I'm Debbie Oldham.
Good afternoon, Pippa Plumtree Varley. I'm Principal Legal Officer and Legal Advisor for the panel this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Carr, Head of Development Management.
Good afternoon, David Newbury, the Lead Planning Officer for the Plans panel.
Thank you for that. And before we go to the formal agenda that we have in front of us, I would like to pay tribute to ex-councillor Elizabeth Nash. Elizabeth has sat on plans panels for, I think, longer than I can remember, and has made a very significant difference to many, many things across the city, in addition to the influence that she's had over the planning process. She's been a really valuable member of, I think, all three plans panels in her time, and certainly has sat on at least two parallel for many, many years. She's a lady who knew her mind, but always delivered it in the most professional, precise and carefully calculated way to make a really positive difference. And as we know, her passion for trees and for culture and heritage went before her. She was exemplary, in my view, in the field, and I'm sure that those views are shared across the parties and right round the table, officers and councillors alike. She will be very, very sadly missed, and I, for one, I'm very sorry that she wasn't successful at the last election. But she's a very, very interesting and industrious person, and I'm quite sure that she will go on to do many interesting things, including her current occupation of travel and leading travel for others. So we wish her all the very best in the next step of her career. I can invite people to say anything if you would like to about Liz, or perhaps you're happy with the words that I've already said. So thank you very much. Thank you, Liz. And can I welcome Councillor Kaylee Brooks, who's been appointed to the panel until the end of its formal term, when we all get allocated our new positions. But welcome, Councillor Brooks. We're very pleased to have you here today. Thank you. So, Debbie, we can now go on to your preliminary items, please.
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Agenda item 2, there are no items which require the exclusion of the press or the public. Under agenda item 3, there are no late items of business. Under agenda item 4, could I ask members to declare any interests? I'll take silence as there are none. And under agenda item 5, apologies have been received from Councillor Stevenson, and Councillor Smith is present as his substitute today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you and welcome, Councillor Smith. Thank you for sitting with us this afternoon. Much appreciated. I'm going to go to the minutes now, folks, and I'll do my usual of going through a page at a time and taking matters arising and accuracy together, if I may. So page 7 of your packs. Oh, that's site visits, sorry. Page 8 of your packs. Page 9. Page 10. Okay, so that leads us to our substantive item today, which is the North Leeds Golf Centre, and I'm going to hand over to your presentation next.
Thank you, Chair. Just before we start, I've just got a quick update for you. Since the publication of the report, we've received a petition in objection to the proposed development. And this petition was signed by 503 people. So the petition includes individual comments from each representative. However, all of the material planning considerations which are within the petition have already been covered within the officer report. We also received 5 separate letters of objection. Again, the issues raised within these letters have already been covered within the report. In order to update the numbers within the report, paragraph 25 should now read 91 letters in support, 97 in objection, plus the 503 person petition, plus 3 general comments. And paragraphs 27 to 30 and 135 to 138 of the officer report respond to the issues raised within the representations. Before I start, I'll also add that some members on this panel will remember when this application was brought as a position statement back on the 5th of November 2020. At that time, the purpose of the position statement was to inform members of the proposal, report on progress, and to seek general comments on the key planning issues. This time it differs because we're seeking to determine the plan application. So since it was considered as a position statement, the broad description of the application is essentially the same. The number of lodges has been reduced to 35. There's been a reduction in the scale and redesign of the clubhouse buildings. And there's also been some additional information in relation to community engagement and environmental sustainability. So moving on to proposals, it relates to a hybrid application for a full plan application for extensions and annex buildings to the existing clubhouse, including changes to the car park, the construction of 35 holiday lodges with associated landscaping and parking, and then outline permission for change of use of agricultural land to golf course, realignment of the driving range, creation of an adventure golf area, and alterations to the existing golf course to create a foot golf course. And this is all at Leeds Golf Centre in Wyke. Bit of a delay there. So the red line there just shows the application boundary. So that encompasses the main clubhouse buildings, which are just around there in the orange. So that's the existing clubhouse building. Then there's the existing par 3 course, which extends to the south of the clubhouse building and also to the east. And then there's some agricultural land to the northern extent there. We can see this a bit better on the aerial there. So this is the context that the site sits within. The main 18-hole golf course for the golf club is to the west of the red line there, so that's not within the application boundary. The golf club is situated within the green belt, so just to the south of that picture there is Allwoodley and Leeds Grammar School, and that forms the edge of the main urban conurbation. And essentially the area between the roundabout near the grammar school all the way to the River Wharf and near the Harrogate boundaries greenbelt, and the area is also designated as a special landscape area. Wyke Village just lies to the east there, so that's a small hamlet, and with very limited services and community facilities. The main Harrogate Road is the road to the west there, and that links like Leeds Grammar School to Harewood and on to Harrogate from there. And as you can see from that picture there, there's a range of golf courses to the right as well. So there's more Allerton golf course there, and there's the village golf course just to the north of that as well. And this Leeds Golf Centre sits within a wider belt of golf courses which form like the northern edge of the green belt, and there's lots in there, including Scarcroft, Brandon Golf Club, Orwoodley, Moortown, Sandmore, Headingley and Cookridge. So this is just a general overview of a master plan. So I thought it'd be good just to show this to, you know, given it's a very large site, so you can orientate yourselves on it. So School Lane is the main access and the bridleway which runs east-west across the site, which is just here. So to the south of that is the 35-unit Eco Lodge development with the associated car park and landscaping. And as you can see from the picture there, that includes the formation of some lakes. The white land around the centre is the redevelopment of the extended clubhouse, and that includes a 2-storey driving range, which is a spur which extends to the east. The green area is the relocated 9-hole foot golf course, and the yellow area is the relocated 9-hole par 3 academy course, and that's on the area of existing agricultural land. The orange is the realigned driving range, and the purple area towards the centre of the plan is the proposed adventure golf area. Now, this is a hybrid application as specified within the description. So this is an application that seeks outline permission for some parts and full plan permission for others. So full plan permission sought for the clubhouse redevelopment and the lodges, and outline for the rest of the developments. To start with, I'll just take you through the site quickly. So this is the main access from School Lane, where it becomes part of the Leeds Golf Centre. And here you can see as it extends along. So if you just look into the far end of that picture there, you can see where School Lane changes from a made road to an unmade road, and School Lane is a bridleway. And then to the right hand side there, you can see a couple of holes punctuated within the hedge, and they provide the access and exit to the existing car park development. And you can see the clubhouse just to the right of the hedge there, which is a 2-storey building of traditional form and materials. So this is the area to the south of School Lane. So this is where the Eco Lodge development will be, and at the moment it's a par 3 course and a foot golf area. And these are other pictures. So this would be extending down southwards across the, or probably southwestwards towards the across the Eco Lodge development. So you can see how the land undulates a bit, and some of the 2-storey lodges will be towards the rear of this picture, built into that little slope. For those that aren't well, who don't know what a foot golf green is, this is a typical example of one. So they tend to be artificial greens with a slightly larger hole, but you know, it can be quite similar within the wider landscape to a typical golf green. This is again looking south, just showing the land levels and the existing landscape. And then this is looking across Wykeridge Road to the south. So this would be the far end of the Eco Lodge development to the south. And it just sets the wider context for the land. So you can see the open countryside the other side. And Wykeridge Lane's on quite a lower level there. We drove past it on the bus, and you got glimpses into the site, but the land levels do make a difference. This is another picture looking up towards what would be called the quarry area of the lodge development, which you can kind of see that cliff face just central towards the rear. This is looking from the lodge development site to the existing clubhouse. So you can see that side gable of the existing clubhouse there. And again, another view from within the lodge development towards the clubhouse. And you can just see the existing driving range spur, which goes off to the rear of that clubhouse there. This is the clubhouse from the western elevation. So this one faces the main golf course, and there's some practice greens and a drinks terrace at the front of this. So it's a 2-storey clubhouse, and you can see it's had some extensions to the sides there already. And this is the main entrance from the car park. So this is how people currently access the site. There's a reception area in there, a club shop, some changing rooms, and obviously the driving range as well as a function room which doubles as the bar area. So this is the car park. It's quite a large car park. There's 200 odd spaces as existing, and that includes a temporary like grasscrete area to the far side, which we'll go into. You can see the landscape in there to the just beyond the car parking, which shields the driving range at the present time. And this is from the almost the far end of the car park, looking back towards the clubhouse. And this is the additional area of almost informal overflow car parking at the moment. This is the other part of the par 3 course. So this is just the right hand side of the clubhouse to the east. This is also used as a par 3 course at the moment, and this is the area that would move to the new foot golf course. And then this is the existing driving range. It slopes quite steeply up towards the top there, so that bush you can see is on the ridge of the hill. And there's mature landscaping to the west hand side. And then this is from the ridge of the hill looking back down. So I pointed out to members on site, this is an earlier photo, but this area around here is an unauthorised driving range extension, and we got told on site by the agents that this will soon be removed. So when you're considering the impact of proposals, please don't take this element into consideration, because it doesn't have permission at this moment in time. And then this is a picture from the top of the ridge, and this is looking over the agricultural fields which will form the new golf course. So that, as you can see, the land slopes down into a valley and then back up the other side. And then these are some images that have been provided by the applicants to show the kind of developments I had in mind for the adventure golf area, because we've had very limited information in that regard. And you can see they differ slightly, but they tend to be man-made, and the bottom left one shows significant structures. I think that's some form of pirate ship. So this is the existing clubhouse building, just in plan form. This is a rough outline of the existing footprint. So it includes a reasonable sized clubhouse bar, club shop, changing facilities, and the existing driving range is 15 bay. And the accommodation within the existing clubhouse is across 2 floors. And this is moving on to the clubhouse proposals. So this is the lower ground floor level. So on this level, there's a plant room, lobby, a kitchen, adventure golf room, driving range store, and for ball collection vehicles. And then moving on to the ground floor, there's a bar, kitchen, a golf club bar area, which includes an external patio terrace. There's a golf reception area, pro shop, changing rooms, office, teaching bays, and then there's 15 new driving range bays, as well as a foot golf sports bar with external terrace. And this is the first floor. So those purple areas to the left-hand side there are the large function rooms which incorporate a balcony terrace. There's meeting spaces with balcony terraces, another kitchen, pre-function room, some studio classes, teaching spaces, teaching bays, and an additional 15 driving range bays. So they're at the first floor level of the driving range. And then just on the top floor there, you have your gym, health spa reception area, which has got a balcony, health spa lounge, and free treatment rooms, a sauna, steam spa, as well as a storage room. So moving on to the elevations of the new clubhouse. So you saw the pictures of the existing clubhouse, and that top view there is taken as if you were from School Lane looking at where the existing main entrance is to the golf club. So you can see from this side, it's still got a two-storey farm with a pitched roof, typical materials railing. You can see the two-storey driving range annex going off to the right-hand side there, and that incorporates a green roof with solar panels as well. And then there's just a little annex to the far right-hand side down there, which is two-storey as well. And then this is the elevation as if you're looking from the golf course. So this is the west elevation. And as you can see there, it shows a quite substantial, like 3-storey development with a flat roof. With a flat roof to this elevation. So that red line there shows the existing scale of the building. Now you've got to bear in mind here that existing building, that top red line there is the ridge height of the roof. So in terms of massing, it's 2-storey scale. And you'll also see from the next plan that this elevation is actually brought towards you a bit further. But might be the next one after this, but this just shows a elevation of what the 2-storey driving range is going to look like. The top one shows it in conjunction with the rest of the building. So the quite spacious driving range bays with large sofas in there as well. This is the cross section I was hoping to show you before, but the red line there indicates the existing mass of the existing building. So you can see from the middle drawing there that 3-storey elevation is actually being pulled forward as well. And then as you go further down, that the new building is of significantly greater bulk than what's already there. Then if you can see the thick black line, that shows a fallback position. So the golf centres previously obtained planning permission for other developments. I think it was back in 2013, and these are still extant because they've been partly implemented. But as you can see there, what's being proposed now goes above and beyond that historic permission. This is just a comparison. So this is this table's in the report anyway, but I thought it'd be useful to put it in here. So this shows a comparison between the existing building, what's been approved, so the fallback position, and then the current scheme on the right. And this is gross external area, which is just one way which we can look at the comparative size of a building. But as you can see there, the gross external area of a proposal is at least 3 times the size of, well, about 3 times the size of the existing building, with accommodation across 4 floors as opposed to 2 at present. And even if you consider the fallback position, it's almost twice the size of that. So these are some CGI images which have been produced. So this one's from the car park looking towards the main entrance. So you can see it's been given quite an attractive frontage to this elevation. It maintains its 2-storey scale. It's using traditional materials, albeit there's solar panels on the roof there. You've got the chimney element, and that's coupled with landscaping as well. This is a CGI from the western elevation. So this is the 3-storey elements and what that will look like from the main golf course. This is showing, so as you follow School Lane, as it becomes the unmade bridleway further up, this shows views back towards the existing clubhouse. And then this is a comparison of what the mock-up is for the proposed elevation. And then this just leads back to the overall master plan. But as you can see at the bottom, there's some colour coding there on the lodges. So the lighter pink coloured lodges are the single storey 2-person lodges. The yellow ones towards the bottom are the 2-storey 4-bedroom lodges, and the other purple ones are 4-bedroom single-storey lodges. So it's predominantly 2-storey lodges with a few, I think it's 7 in total 4-bed ones. This is a closer look at the lodge development. So you can see that they're set within 2 main zones, really, with footpath networks linking them all in. So the most northern ones are set around a central lake, and I think there's 25 lodges there, and there's I think it's a 41 space car park to the north, which is accessed from School Lane, which is just there. And this diagram here also shows the proposed tree planting. So all those little circles there are proposed new tree planting, and that forms part of the landscape proposals which have been put forward. So the southern ones there are formed around the quarry area, and there's a beck down there as well, which splits them in the middle. And the intention is to build the 2-storey ones into the existing landform, which you should see through the drawings. I'm going to just take you through. This is a plan for the standard 2-bedroom lodges, and you can see a little floor plan in the bottom left-hand corner as well. So they're single-storey in scale, constructed of timber and glazing with some stone detail into the side, and you can see they incorporate green roofs to the top, to the roofs. This is the 4-bedroom single-storey lodges. There's only 2 of these within the development, but they're obviously of a larger footprint, but a similar design. And then these are the 2-storey lodges. You can see in the top right one there how they're using the topography to build the lodges into there. And again, they incorporate green roofs and similar materials. This is a typical cross-section across the development, showing how the lodges will relate to the lake. I might need a manual intervention here. Thank you. This is a CGI of some of the single-storey lodges, just showing the lakeside setting. I'll see if all right. That's the same image, but a night time. Next, please. And then these are the 2-storey lodges. So again, just showing like the quarry area to the side and how they're trying to mitigate the impact by setting those into the landform there. But they're obviously of a grander scale. So we'll just if we just leave this image up whilst I talk about the general planning considerations. I suppose the key planning consideration here is that the site's obviously within the green belt. It's not allocated for any particular development within the local plan, and the whole site lies within the green belt and special landscape area. It's a largely greenfield site in nature, and as members are aware, there's a presumption against inappropriate development within the green belt. And the NPPF advises that inappropriate development is by definition harmful to the green belt and should only be approved in very special circumstances. And local authorities need to ensure that they give substantial weight to any harm to the green belt. So paragraphs 149 and 150 of the NPPF outline some general exceptions to what is classed as inappropriate development in the green belt, and I've detailed these in paragraphs 68 and 69 of the report. But the main issues when considering development proposals in the green belt are whether the proposal constitutes inappropriate development in the green belt, and secondly, if it is inappropriate development, whether the harm by reason of its inappropriateness and any other harm is clearly outweighed by other considerations, so to as amount to very special circumstances needed to justify the development. So several of the greenbelt exceptions which are highlighted in the NPPF also require an assessment as to whether the proposal will preserve openness of the greenbelt. And the concept of openness generally means the state of being free from built development, and the impact of it on openness is an assessment of how built up the greenbelt is now and how built up it would be if a redevelopment occurs. So as I've taken you through the development, you'll realise it contains several distinct elements, and I'll go over these quickly in turn. We've got the relocated golf course, foot golf course, and the realigned driving range, and that's the orange, the yellow, and the green areas there. And only principle-only outline consent is sought for these elements, so we don't have detailed course layouts or landscaping, for example, and they'd follow with any reserve matters application at a later date. So in summary, these elements are considered to constitute appropriate development, given that an outdoor sports use generally meets one of the Greenbelt exceptions, and it's considered that there's enough scope within that area for any development to be brought forward which maintains openness within the reserve matters application. And the foot golf and the realigned golf course are likely to have a minimal impact when you consider the existing golf course setting. So in conclusion, these three elements are considered not to constitute inappropriate developments. For holiday lodges, they don't meet any of the exceptions highlighted within the MPPF or UDP N33, and as such they're considered to form inappropriate developments. And the proposed lodges are considered to result in considerable harm to the Greenbelt in terms of loss of openness, and some of the key considerations are it's quite a low density layout, so it's about a 4 hectare site, and that Greenbelt land will effectively become brownfield once the development takes place. There's 35 units of accommodation, a large car park, and then you've got your other ancillary developments such as the footpaths, which will have a pronounced impact on the spatial aspects of the Greenbelt. It's also the visual impact. So we've obviously got School Lane, which is a bridleway running across the development, and there'll be some views between the hedges at close quarters of the lodges, and in particular the car park from this direction. And obviously it's a par 3 golf course at the moment, and the lodge development will result in a marked increase in the level of activity on this part of the site compared to that existing use. And another consideration is we have a safe policy within the UDP, which is GB21, which relates to holiday accommodation and holiday accommodation within the Greenbelt specifically. And it states, amongst others, that hotels and other permanent holiday accommodation will not be permitted within the Greenbelt. So this development would be clearly at odds with that development, that policy. So overall, the lodges are considered to form inappropriate development, and it's considered the resultant site down the south there would be distinctly more urban than it is at the present time. Moving on to Clubhouse Alterations, paragraph 149C of the MPPF permits extensions and alterations to buildings in the Greenbelt, providing that they do not result in disproportionate additions. Paragraph 22 of the report outlines the quite complex planning history for this site, and we've already been quite flexible and granted quite a few extensions to the clubhouse, some of which appear to have been constructed. But it can be seen from that comparison table that I put forward that these extensions cannot be considered to form small extensions to the building. And the policy test is actually against the original building, and the figures I brought up were against the building as existing, so it'd be a worse situation than shown within that table. And then also we quickly flew by the floor plan, and there's some concerns there that some of the uses proposed within the clubhouse building go beyond the functional need of a general golf club. So you've got the spa facilities, the very spacious driving range elements, and the other commercial aspects. So whilst there is that 2013 fallback position, we think it's not a fallback position because this redevelopment goes above and beyond what was granted at that time, and then you've also got the lodge development on top of that. So overall, the clubhouse redevelopment is considered to constitute disproportionate additions and would be inappropriate development. Then finally, the adventure golf. So we saw some slides of the adventure golf and the kind of use which they're hoping to promote. So a lot of these had ornamental features, artificial glass, and some had significant structures such as the pirate ship. And it's considered that this use is almost more akin to a leisure use than a sport and recreation. And even if we were to consider the adventure golf as an appropriate use within the greenbelt, we'd then have to consider whether the development would have would preserve openness. And I think given the scale of some of the structures in those pictures and the type of development, it'd be very difficult for us to come to the conclusion that it would. So overall, there's several elements of the proposal that are considered to form inappropriate development, and planning policy is clear that inappropriate development is by definition harmful to the greenbelt, and substantial weight should be attributed to such harm, and such developments will not be approved except in very special circumstances. The applicant has put forward a variety of very special circumstances, and these will be covered later. But first, we'll just look at some of the other material planning considerations. So I touched upon the sites within the special landscape area, and these are generally considered to be the most attractive areas of countryside within Leeds. And policy requires development proposals in these areas to have particular regard to the conservation of the landscape. In terms of its immediate setting, when you're on the site, it's obviously appears as a golf club, but it's within the wider setting of the open countryside. The proposed clubhouse and lodges are considered to be of architectural merits, and quite nice design, and they provide some mitigation in terms of landscape impact. So you've got things like the green roofs, the natural materials being used, the significant landscaping proposals using topography where they can, and the most prominent elevations of a clubhouse have also been designed to have more of a rural feel, retaining that 2-story scale. However, in contrast, as you'll have seen from the images, the west elevation, the 3-story one, is quite significantly, it's of significant bulk, it's of modern appearance, and it significantly adds to the mass of the existing building. The lodge development also has a prominent car park, and there's a concern about how conspicuous the development will be at night time compared to the existing situation, because at the moment you've obviously got a golf course with no lighting, moving to a lodge development, which even if you put forward a low impact lighting scheme, there's going to be a discernible impact there. So I think overall, in terms of its sheer increase in scale and height, we think the development will be at odds with the wider rural landscape, and especially when viewed at close quarters from that school lane public right of way. So I think essentially what we're saying is, at the moment, you've got the existing clubhouse building and developments, and they kind of sit quite neatly, even though they've been extending. It's quite a large building, they sit quite neatly within in the local landscape, and a clubhouse and the golf courses are something that you wouldn't not expect to see within the greenbelt. They're appropriate for that area, whereas the proposal goes above and beyond, significantly stretching the boundaries in this regard. So in terms of the economy and tourism, the applicants have put forward lots of arguments which I've detailed in the report in terms of the economic benefits. These relate to the construction industry, creating jobs, creating direct jobs at the golf club, and uplifting visitors and GVA, the wider economy. And in relation to the rural economy, our local plan policy, in particular core strategy, state that a balance needs to be struck between providing local employment opportunities, promoting sustainable patterns of development, and protecting the character of the countryside and reflecting greenbelt purposes. So in this instance, it's considered that the proposal would not constitute a sustainable rural tourism, largely given the large scale of the lodge development and the difficulties of assimilating that into the countryside given its scale. The location of the development also has a high reliance on car-based transport, and this is at the bottom end of the settlement hierarchy, so we expect a lot of our tourist and hotel accommodation to be based on the settlement hierarchy. And when you get to that lower end, you want your rural tourism to be discreet and sit neatly within the context. And you're going to have a 35 lodge development next to what is a small hamlet there, with obviously the accessibility difficulties which I've highlighted. So whilst growth and diversification of the rural economy is generally supported by the core strategy and national policy, in this instance, we don't consider that the proposal constitutes sustainable rural tourism. And there's also the issue with main town centre uses, given that hotel and leisure uses are proposed, but the applicants have put forward a sequential test, and the policy officers think that it's passed that test, and there's no policy conflict in this regard. Residential amenity. The nearest residential dwellings are situated 175 metres from the extended clubhouse, and the nearest residential dwellings is 75 metres to the east of the lodge developments. So whilst the redeveloped clubhouse and lodges have greater potential for noise in the existing development, it's considered that the offset distances will not result in material harm. And we also think that the potential noise nuisance can be mitigated by measures such as the implementation of a noise mitigation plan, restrictions on amplified music, hours of operation, usage of the terraced areas, as well as sound insulation. And then particularly with the lodge proposals, which are 75 metres away from the nearest dwelling, it's a low density style of developments, largely formed by 2-bed units. So I think this limits the potential for groups gathering and noise in that regard. And we can always put a condition on relating to a management plan to help mitigate these impacts further. Ecology, nature and trees, and the ecological impact assessment, biodiversity impact calculator and several species surveys have been undertaken. The proposal generally takes place upon an existing golf course, which is quite an intensely managed setting. Notwithstanding that there are pockets of high value areas such as woodland, scrub and grassland there, but these will be largely safeguarded. So the development incorporates measures such as green roofs, formation of lakes, significant landscaping, and the Conservation Office was satisfied that the development can demonstrate a biodiversity net gain, subject to the detail matters going through any conditions. And in terms of tree planting, whilst some trees will be lost, there's a overall significant gain in tree coverage across the site following the redevelopment proposals. Highways considerations, transport assessment and travel plan have been provided. The proposal will increase the size of the existing golf club car park from 204 to 230, whilst the lodge development itself has a separate 41 spaces. This level of parking provision is considered acceptable. The proposal will result in improvements to School Lane along the site frontage, which is currently unmade. So there'll be an extension of that unmade element slightly further forward to cover the new access and exits to the extended car park. And while School Lane is a narrow carriageway, the proposal will lead to an increase in vehicle movements, and the proposal will result in an increase in vehicle movements. The trip generation from the development, which is detailed in paragraph 125 of the report, is not considered to result in significant highways impacts, and there will also be improvements to School Lane along the site frontage. In terms of other considerations, there's issues such as flood risk and land contamination, which have been considered, which don't give rise to any significant issues which cannot be appropriately mitigated through planning conditions. And then finally, I just want to go back to the issue of very special circumstances, which is, I suppose, the crux of what we're considering here, given the greenbelt harm which we've considered. You've heard that officers consider that the proposal will result in quite significant harm to the greenbelts by reason of its inappropriateness and encroachment into the countryside, whilst harm's also been identified to the special landscape area as well as rural tourism objectives. So just to recap, the NPPF states that substantial weight should be attributed to any greenbelt harm, and such development should not be approved except in very special circumstances. Very special circumstances do not exist unless the potential harm to the greenbelt by reason of inappropriateness and any other harm resulting from the proposal is clearly outweighed by other considerations. Now, the applicants have put forward several matters which they consider to constitute very special circumstances. These are covered in paragraph 140 and beyond within the report, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from the applicants later, and they'll expand on these, no doubt. But just to quickly fly through some of these and give a quick response. The first argument is that the proposal will create a regional golf facility. This, in principle, is a matter that could, in combination with other factors, be considered to constitute a VSC, a very special circumstance. However, officers consider that limited evidence that this aspiration to be a regional golf facility is feasible has been put forward. I mean, key to this is that the main 18-hole golf course is actually outside of the area, so there won't be any improvements in that regard. And the new course is a par 3 one. It's only subject to outline permission, so we've not seen that detail of the course yet. So we're not sure what quality, what desirability the new course will have. And overall, the claims appear to be more akin to aspirations, which other golf courses in the local area could well have to be a regional golf facility, rather than having the substance there to prove it will be. So as such, this matter is not considered to constitute a very special circumstance. They've also put forward economic and tourism benefits. Again, this is a matter which could, in principle, constitute a very special circumstance. I think the benefits to the local economy are noted, and it's feasible that providing a place for golfers to stay overnight is a potential benefit to neighbouring courses, as well as the wider economy, and in particular the local golfing economy. However, to counteract this, proposal is close to a range of nearby hotel accommodation, so that it's not like there's no accommodation within the area, it's just there's no golf specific accommodation. There's also potentially other alternatives within the site which could provide a similar tourism benefit in terms of the number of rooms, whilst creating a less degree of harm to the greenbelt. In terms of job creation, I mean, this is always welcomed by planning policy. However, the level of direct jobs from the development is not at a level where it's going to have a significant positive impact. And then the benefits to the construction economy, which they've highlighted, are also going to be time limited, of course. So in this instance, whilst there are likely to be some economic and tourism benefits to the scheme, these in combination are only attributed moderate weight. Community and public benefits. Benefits have been advanced, such as charity and school support. I mean, these are strongly supported and are commendable, and I think the golf course has shown that they've got a good track record across these elements. However, a lot of these benefits are already occurring and are existing benefits, so it's hard for us to add additional weight in this policy, looking at this application, if they're already occurring. It's also not clear how some elements of the scheme, such as the lodges and the spa facilities, directly linked to these benefits. There's a commitment to a £300,000 fund for community activities. However, we don't currently have a mechanism to secure this, although it is feasible, if minded to approve, that we could come up with one. There's a draft memorandum of understanding, but this is, of course, in draft form, so that significantly reduces the level of weight which can be attributed. So the community and public benefits from the development could, in principle, be a very special circumstance. However, in this instance, as I've just discussed, I think we can only attribute limited weight to these. Local support's been put forward as a VSC argument by the applicants, but as you'll note from the report, there's been a considerable level of opposition as well. So it needs to be balanced against that, and we don't consider that this is a VSC. The health and well-being benefits, significant and demonstrable health and well-being benefits is something that could, again, in principle, be VSCs. Health and well-being and childhood obesity are important issues both for Leeds and nationally. And whilst it's feasible that the development could help attract more people to sport, I think in terms of the information we've received, it's largely speculative and unsubstantiated, because on one hand, we've got the existing par-free cost to the south, and that's been replaced by the eco lodges, and that's been replaced by a golf course to the north. So the actual net gain in sports provision across the redevelopment is not significant, really. Yeah, and other elements such as the par-free and the foot golf already exist on the site. The viability of the club is another VSC which has been forwarded by the applicants. Again, this could in principle form a VSC. However, in terms of viability, we've received very limited information, very basic information. It's not in line with national guidance on the matter, and it's not robust enough for us to draw a conclusion on as to whether this 35 lodge development and this level of increase of the clubhouse is what's required to move the golf club out of the red into the green almost. We're not really sure where the line is for that. And the information's also not been open to public scrutiny. As such, we don't consider these viability arguments that have been put forward to constitute a BSc. And the last argument that's been put forward is the climate emergency. So as you'll have seen from the proposals, there's lots of green elements to this scheme. I mean, these are generally commended and supported, and some of which go beyond general policy requirements. So they're looking at net zero carbon as well as BREEAM Excellent, whereas BREEAM Excellent is a policy requirement, and the net zero carbon goes above our existing EN1 policy. However, against this, we have our EN1, EN2 and EN8 environmental policies, and they are already quite a high bar. So whilst there will be an improvement on those policy requirements, it's a net gain, and it's the weight you can attribute to that gain above what we achieve anyway. And in this instance, we don't think that would be so substantial to warrant significant weight in this instance. So concluding on the VSCs, whilst we recognise the development is going to have some benefits in terms of climate change mitigation, economic and tourism benefits and community benefits, we don't consider these individually or cumulatively amount to VSCs which outweigh that harm that have outweigh the greenbelt harm which has been demonstrated. So as such, we think that the proposal is contrary to policy N33 and the MPPF in this regard. And then this kind of sums up the final conclusions that you'll see in the report, where we've looked at all the elements of harm and whether these are outweighed by the VSCs. And in the end of the day, we've come up with 3 reasons for refusal, which are at the start of the document, and these are the greenbelt harm, the harm to special landscape area, and the non-compliance with the objectives of the rural tourism as well. So the key policies there are N33 and GB21 from a greenbelt perspective, N37 of the UDP for special landscape area, and P10, which is a design policy. And then spatial policy 8 of the core strategy in terms of the rural tourism. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Steve, for that very explicit presentation, which I'm sure has given us all a big insight into the application before us. We have some speakers this afternoon. First of all, objectors. Mr. Cyril, am I pronouncing that correctly? Would you like to come forward, please? Have you been shown where to sit? Yes. Okay. So when you're speaking, you'll need to have the mic on, and you've got up to 4 minutes. If you could stick to the 4 minutes, because we will at some point have to cut you off if you exceed that. Okay. Welcome to the meeting, and thank you for coming to share your views with us this afternoon in your own time.
Right. There we go.
Thank you very much, Chair. Members of the Plans Panel. My name is Stephen Sorrell. I live at the Old Forge Cottage, Forge Lane in Wyke. I represent the residents of Wyke who formed a group in opposition to this application, and I speak today with the unanimous support of every member of a resident of Wyke. We've carefully read the planning officer's report, and as you've heard, he makes some very solid points about the application. Naturally, we would emphasise some points more than he has done, such as traffic, drainage, noise and pollution. But in short, this isn't the place to put this scheme. Our traffic consultant commented that you couldn't choose a worse place to put a Centre Park style development, as we've heard. It's an important greenbelt area. There's no public transport at all to Wyke. More traffic will be generated for roads that already struggle to cope, and the ward members are very aware of the fact, and the police, that there's quite often accidents. And it's a small hamlet with only 38 houses in it. Greenbelt is important, and the council spends much of its time rightly defending it. We should not be building holiday lodges on the Greenbelt. The planning officer also makes a key point in his report that there are no very special circumstances to warrant this development, and the applicant has made very little effort to minimise the harm to the Greenbelt from the application. You've also heard that there's no local support for this project at all. Any letters in support have come from golf club members or supporters of Park Lane. What is more relevant is that the golf club has made no effort whatsoever to engage with the local community to try and help shape a scheme that might be acceptable, which is of course how it should be done. 3 of the 5 local parish councils are also in opposition. As a result of this, the residents are deeply concerned about the impact on traffic, drainage, noise and pollution. If the application were granted, it would double the size of Wyke overnight. Another point the applicant made is that this is a very sustainable proposal, but in truth, as an environmental advisor myself, I can say that it lacks any true green credentials, another point that's just been made by the planning officer. But the pièce de résistance of the whole thing is this argument about money. The fact is, this application is just about that. It's about money. The applicant has accepted and admitted that the golf club is unviable. It needs this application to make the money to survive. But if the council accepts this argument, I ask you this, where does it end? If you agree this venture is special, then every other struggling golf club in North Leeds is going to say the same. We're under the cosh. We need to build on virgin greenbelt land to get us out of this mess. Indeed, any other applicant for any planning application in Leeds could make exactly the same points. This is a very dangerous precedent. I could go on about this detail or that, such as whether the Park Lane Foundation really needs a greatly increased clubhouse and spa plus 35 holiday lodges to help widen access to golf and improve the well-being of the less fortunate in our society. But you have heard in some detail from the planning officer all of the various concerns, and he's placed those in his report. In conclusion, our respectful view as residents of Wyke is that the only proper decision to arrive at is to refuse this application.
Thank you very much indeed for that. I'm now going to invite members of the panel to ask you any questions that they'd like to raise. I can see Councillor Sharp. Would you like to go first?
Thanks, Chair. Can you just clarify, has there been no consultation with the community whatsoever in relation to this? Thanks.
What happened was that when the application was first made, a presentation was put up in the entrance to the golf club with some diagrams and photos and so on. And a letter was sent to the 6 nearest houses. And we only found out about that later on. And they were invited to a meeting in the golf club clubhouse, and some did go. And that's how we found out about the rest of the village actually found out about the application. But since that point, that's 4 years ago, there's been no contact whatsoever at any stage with any of the residents.
Is that sufficient information, Councillor Sharp? Any further questions? Yes, thank you. Alan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. I just wonder if you could expand on your concerns about highways and accessibility to the site.
Well, I recognise the highways is a tricky area because the planning officer has gone to the highways department and they've put their submissions into him, and clearly we don't agree with those. But the essence is really quite straightforward, isn't it? For those of you, I'm sure all the members know this part of Wyke. Wyke Ridge Lane goes along. We have speed problems in relation to that. There's now been a camera, not a camera, one of those solar signs put up saying what your speed is coming into the village. But people do go through the village at 60 miles an hour along Wyke Ridge Lane. So that's the first point. And then Forge Lane turns left, of course, and School Lane turns left again off that, and that's the entrance to the golf club. The corner, that junction, is a problem. There's always accidents on that junction because there is a cottage on that junction called Island Cottage, as you might know, which is in a triangle of roads. Because if you're coming from the other direction, you cut off before Forge Lane. If you're coming from the Leeds direction, you turn left on Forge Lane. But those 2 or 3 points of connection are constant accidents, and the police are called to those. There's been injuries and so on. And then the other problem we specifically have is, you must have seen this when you were on the site inspection. When you go into the golf club, it's a single track road. It's a bridle way that you go through. And it's very narrow. There's a gateway. It's narrow. Now, I know we've heard there's some proposals to change a bit of the metal and whatever, but the essential nature of it is it's inadequate. Our position as residents is, what's going to happen if you have a 200+ seat banqueting suite and it's throwing out time at 1 o'clock in the morning because there's something on, and taxis are trying to get in, taxis are trying to get out, people are trying to get out of the car park, the lodges are trying to get there. It's a disaster. It's just not suitable for the use that we're expecting to see from this development.
Would you like to go back, Councillor Lamb?
Yes, thank you. That was very helpful. Just on wider accessibility, one of the benefits described of the scheme is being able to widen participation for golf. Could you, I'm quite familiar with the area, but I think it's useful to have it out there for the panel.
Yes.
So if you didn't own a car and lived in an inner city part of South Leeds,
yes,
say, how would you get from there to Wyke?
Well, there is no public transport. The whole transport thing is a big issue for us, and we were surprised more wasn't made of it by the Highways Department, to be quite honest. But so there's no public transport whatsoever to Wyke. There is to East Keswick further along, where a bus turns round, and you can get there. You cannot get to Wyke. So if I live on the corner of Forge Lane, so you go past the School Lane entrance, about 500 yards up there's a bend, and I live on the bend there. If I want to get public transport, I have to walk a mile along the top road, Wyke Lane, I think that is. I always forget the name. I think it's Wyke Lane. I have to walk along there, take my life into my hands because it's a narrow road and everyone speeds around there, and there's no footpaths of any description, to the A61, and where the most southerly Harewood gates are, there's a bus stop there. The other way, I'd have to go down Forge Lane and turn left down Wyke Lane and walk all the way into East Keswick to find a bus. So the applicants have tried to approach this and say, oh, well, it's a big green development and we'll have EV chargers and whatever. The council is very familiar with the transition to the EV charging network. That's part of what I do. I'm a climate change advisor and renewable energy advisor, and we know that there's not that many EVs registered in Leeds compared to the traffic that can be expected to this site. So it is going to be petrol vehicles and diesel vehicles. It is going to be pollution. It is going to be problems along the whole highway network, and that it's just as simple as that. And I think that's self-evident personally.
Councillor Almas.
Thank you, Chair. My question is around drainage. You mentioned drainage. So
yes,
what is the existing, if you like, arrangement in terms of drainage? And if they have the additional, site built, how would that impact, please?
Well, I'm not a drainage expert, so I say what I know in relation to this. But we did write to the planning officer very recently, because one of the residents further down from me, so I live on the bend on the top of Forge Lane, where it bends, goes around the corner in the house I live in. If I'm going down towards the golf club, the first house on the right, the lady who lives there is a property developer, and they're particularly concerned about this, because if you carry on and you go down a dip and then up the other side before you get to the junction with the entrance to the golf club, and people who drive this way will know that that bottom part floods. And as I understand it, the applicant is saying they will drain into the beck that goes into that stream at the bottom, which comes out in East Keswick. Now, we wrote to the planning officer about this because we thought it was misleading in the report that it said the drainage is not a problem, but it clearly is. Because, and we showed some photographs, we sent in some photographs showing that flooding. Whenever it rains heavily, you go down that dip of Forge Lane and you have to go in the middle of the road because both sides are flooded, because that beck that goes to East Keswick is insufficient, and the new drainage from the new development will go into that beck.
Thank you. Is that sufficient information, Councillor Almus, or would you like to come back?
Yeah, I'd be interested to find out how, I mean, obviously you're not an expert on drainage or whatever, but if it's an existing issue already, how would that,
surely it's got to exacerbate it. Maybe the planning officer can help me, but I can't tell you the technical side of it, but I know that currently that road floods and it does it on a frequent basis. And I can only assume that it follows that if there's more drainage going into that beck, then the position must be worse by definition. That's our position.
Thank you. We'll invite the planning officer to come in during the discussion. Thank you for that. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Anderson.
Quickie, is there any part of the development, I mean, we've got one application here, but there are various parts to it. Are there any parts of the development that are less unacceptable than others? In other words, at a push and with a bit of consultation, you might be able to do something with.
It's a very
just before you answer it, because actually you pinched my question,
sorry,
Councillor Anderson.
Sorry.
I was just going to frame it slightly differently, but it will result in the same information. You did say earlier on that you should have been, as residents, invited to help shape a development. And my question, very similarly to Councillor Anderson's, was what kind of development would be acceptable to you? So it's a sort of the same
I was
question,
going to say, actually, the reason I said that is what I do is I work on large renewable energy projects, principally solar farms, but some wind farms and so on. So I'm very aware of objections to those. So if I'm doing a solar farm, and let's face it, the Mori polls show that solar farms are 80 to 90% acceptable to most people these days. So you're not really pushing the car uphill on your own. But when I am involved in a project, and I only work for local authority projects, by the way, I make sure that the council absolutely bends over backwards to engage with everybody so they understand what it's about, how it'll work, what it's achieving. Everyone gets their chance to have a say. So you can understand my indignation that we have completely been ignored here. And when we say ignored, we mean ignored. The applicant has never bothered at all what the residents think in Wyke in relation to this. But the substance, sorry, I beg your pardon, I will go on to the substance. Obviously, the most important thing here for us is the holiday lodges. I'm sure everyone appreciates that. This is virgin greenbelt land. And remember, the other thing here is that when I say I live on the corner there, perhaps I should explain this. I live in a passive house. I built the first passive house in Leeds, and I had to apply for planning permission for that passive house, which I got on the third attempt. And other residents in Leeds have also applied for planning consent for various things. And the green belt has always been a really, really big issue in relation to this. And so we were really quite shocked about the idea of building what was originally 39 houses on virgin greenbelt land. That is our biggest concern. But following on from that, I suspect residents are less concerned about the foot golf. I suspect they're less concerned about the par 3. We don't have a problem with the golf course that's there now. I thought the plan officer made an excellent statement in saying it fits neatly in the landscape. You know, it's been there a long time. We're all right with all of that. But the clubhouse, you saw the photos, the clubhouse is just gigantic compared to what it was before. And surely nobody's sensibly saying they need a health suite and a swimming pool and all the other things and a 200-seat banqueting suite to run a golf course. I mean, it just doesn't follow. This is all about a money-making thing. So the clubhouse is the other big problem that we have. Perhaps the other aspects are of less concern, but I certainly couldn't say they're of no concern.
Thank you for that. Are there any further questions? Yes, Councillor Flint.
Just a couple of quick questions as a local resident. Where is the nearest shop that people from the holiday lodges would have to go to for provisions?
They'd have to go out of the site, so down School Lane, turn right down Forge Lane, then go along White Ridge Lane, and the nearest shop would be the one stop by the Dexter pub or the Sainsbury's local. There's no shops the other way, which goes to East Keswick, and there's no shops before you get to Harrogate if you go north.
Okay. And regarding like the special landscape, as a local resident, how do you feel about the impact from a distance? Like, would the changes proposed affect what you can see from a distance in the surrounding countryside?
Well, some of the houses you wouldn't see it from my property, but quite a few properties you would actually see it from. I mean, actually, there was another point there that you just reminded me of when I talked about what we object to and what we perhaps are less concerned about. One of the actual problems that we are concerned about is the driving range, because the driving range already has substantial lighting that spreads out. So if you are coming from Harrogate and you turn left down White Lane opposite Harewood Gates, it looks like a spaceship's landed. You can literally see the light, everything, light pollution. You can't see the site, but it's all lit up. That's the current lighting. If you then make that a 2-story extension, then by definition, the lights are going to be even bigger. And there's a row of houses along there, and the lighting is going to all go into there. But only some of the houses will overlook it, but you will definitely see its impact. And you'll see it from White Ridge Lane, you'll see it from Forge Lane, and you'll see it from School Lane.
Is that all right, Councillor Flint? Would you like to ask anything further? Okay. Well, can I thank you very much indeed for coming and all of that information, which is highly relevant to our debate. Thank you very much indeed. So we now have some speakers in support of the application, Mr. Windrus and Councillor Marshall Katung, I believe. Well, thank you again very much, both of you, for coming this afternoon and for putting your views forward. I understand that you're going to split the 4 minutes between you, 2 minutes each, and that you're both more than used to being in that seat, so I don't need to explain anything further to you. Who's going to begin? Okay, thank you, Andrew, in your own time.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, Andrew Windrus, planning consultant for the application. I'm joined to my left by Hanif Malik from the Park Lane Foundation, and as you will all know, Councillor Katung, who will speak with us as well. We've also got the wider team with us here as well, so architects, other members of the foundation and Park Lane group as well, if there were any other specific questions. Clearly, the application you see today has responded to the presentation that we made on the November 2019, where 2020 even, where a number of comments were made and the design and the scale of the scheme has been amended accordingly. So hopefully that is welcomed by yourselves. There's clearly some more issues that are to be discussed today. The key one I'll talk about will be the appropriateness of the development. It has been touched on that sports facilities are appropriate in the Greenbelt, and it's the scale largely that we're talking today, with the lodges being a separate element. So a clubhouse is an appropriate facility, as is a driving range. yes, these are larger than the previous approvals and what is there at the moment, but this is intended to be a large regional and important golfing centre, not just a golf club where a few people turn up on a Saturday afternoon to play their weekly game, but use all year round with the community facilities that will allow to come forward. Just picking up on a couple of the extra bits we have in terms of the various special circumstances. We have biodiversity net gain, which has been agreed by the Nature Conservation Officer. We talk about the local jobs which are in the report. Furthermore, it's circa 300 trees that will be planted on the site, so having some significant carbon sequestration benefits over time in that respect. And just in terms of some of the points that have been made, clearly there are no technical objections from officers with regard to drainage and highways, so something that we're very comfortable and confident about. With regard to some of the lighting points that have been made, the lights that are there at the moment, clearly older, and something that with a new facility gets a lot more focus and a great improvement, and there's been a significant improvement in that respect, clearly with technology in recent years, so something that can be explored. So the scheme has already responded to members' comments previously, and that's something we're happy to continue to take forward.
I think that meant your 2 minutes was over. Thank you. Was that the end of your statement, Andrew? Did you have any?
It was, yes.
Yes, that's fine. So Councillor Marshall-Caton, when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, members. I am here representing Packling Foundation as a board member, and my core responsibility on there is the community engagement in terms of sports. I'm a sportswoman and a sports coach, and since joining them in 2019, one of the things I really like about this foundation is their diversity and inclusion. I always say diversity is a fact and our inclusion is a choice. And the fact that I have been able to work with so many children in our inner city schools with this foundation, taking them to the club, playing foot golf. I mean, you just need to see the eyes of these young children who on a normal day would not have that access. Sports inequality is very huge. Health and fitness is is something I'm really, really passionate about. And I am so pleased that this foundation has got that ethos and that value. So for me, I have joined them, I support them because I know exactly what they're doing with our communities, especially with our children who are less privileged than so many children who live in that area where this course is going to be situated. So for me here, their community engagement is something that I really, really support. I am in awe of what they do, their humility and what they give back to our community. To me, it is priceless. So I am here to support this application in terms of the community engagement that I do know that we engage with, especially with our inner city schools. And we were doing that until the pandemic, but as soon as things have been lifted up now, our kids are beginning to come back. Foot golf is something that we do with our children. It's just amazing to see how these little kids are playing foot golf. I mean, children that you would never have thought. There's a little girl called Fatima from Hare Hills Primary School with her scarf, you know, kicking the balls even better than the boys. And for me, those are the kind of excitement that I would like to see, that organizations who are blessed and gifted are able to reach back to our communities. And this is one thing I know that Packling are doing. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So you now know that the procedure is that I'm going to ask members around the table if there are any questions you'd like to ask based on that. Councillor Brooks and then Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. On page 45 in the report on paragraph 152 and 153, it states that there's not been enough information given on the viability assessment for the business case for building on the Greenbelt. I was just wondering if you've got more information that can fill that out, because clearly officers aren't comfortable with the level of detail that's been given, and also how many jobs would be lost if the golf club closes. Yes,
certainly. We did provide a statement, and I'll just try and remember some of the additional figures, but that largely talked about that the club was being supported by the wider Park Lane group, so as opposed to its own business and the foundation, to the tune of circa £200,000 a year. So without that, then the club couldn't afford to run. So that was kind of the crux of it, rather than going into a sort of detailed construction element that you might see for new build schemes that we've certainly talked about previously. So that was more that the club was losing money each year and it needed this input from the group to maintain its operation. That's where this scheme seeks to create an independent operation that will stand on its own 2 feet in essence.
Forgive me, but in improving very special circumstances, the economic argument and the viability argument has been put forward quite strongly by the applicant. So I would like to see more meat on the bone with it, please.
Yeah, that's certainly something we can provide, and I suppose it's within the general realms of the very special circumstances. Some of them would be embedded within a Section 106, and such like community use, which is quite a typical element that can go into a Section 106 agreement, in addition to the jobs, and those being local jobs and local businesses being used to help that club operate. So that's something where, again, it was touched on in the officer presentation. There are some very special circumstances. The mechanism isn't there. We do have a memorandum of understanding and a community use agreement in draft, and that just needs finalising in a Section 106 agreed with officers. Clearly, because we had a recommendation of approval, that's not been progressed with officers. But if we are able to obviously negotiate the scheme today, then that's something that we'd be more than happy to enter into.
You want to come back, Councillor Brooks?
Yes, please, Chair. Because so the MPPG advises, I'm just reading from the report, any viability assessment should follow the government's recommended approach to assessing viability as set out in this national planning guidance and be proportionate, simple, transparent and publicly available. But you're coming to panel with no publicly available numbers for us to look at, to assess whether there is an economic need. Like, I'm saying you're not making our jobs very easy.
Sure, that's where this isn't it's not a viability appraisal to demonstrate, such as affordable housing cannot be delivered on a housing scheme by going through the constructions. There's a discussion document which has been put in, which references the losses that the club are making. And it talks about the costs of this development, the profit this development hopes to be able to achieve, to therefore be able to say, allow the club to stand on its own 2 feet without external support. So there's a statement that's been provided, and that is a publicly available document. What there isn't is a full construction analysis and things like that, because it's not a viability appraisal in that sense. So there's certainly more that could be provided on that if that was necessary. But so the document is a different approach that's been taken in that sense.
Shall we move on from that now?
Sorry, I was just wondering if the officers would like to fill in what they found unacceptable in terms of what was presented, if it's a case that an assessment was submitted.
Can we leave that as an officer question, and Steve will come back to it at the appropriate time? Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a few actually. If this application went through, what assurances can you give that the 35 holiday lodges would stay as holiday lodges? My other point is, what amenities will be provided by you, i.e. in terms of a shop, if it went through? Is the adventure golf focused just for children? And my other one is, why has there been no consultation with the community in the last 4 years?
Respect of the lodges, then yes, they would only be granted if they were a C1 in inverted commas, sometimes bracketed, hotel use, so they would need a change of use to convert to residential accommodation. They are only overnight accommodation associated with the golf club, so they would stay in that respect, would need a planning application to change them, and current policy would not support that change at all. With regard to the shop, there's the professional shop on site at the moment that already stocks some snacks and things like that. There's clearly the restaurant and the bar and things like that as facility. The people that are intended to stay in the lodges are largely viewed to would be eating on site. There is some self-catering, and I think that's a facility that could be expanded in terms of the professional shop itself. So that already sells some food and things that can be expanded if people are found to be wanting further provisions on site. That's something that can be comfortably achieved. With regard to the adventure golf, no, that's certainly for all people. The design, as has been stated, has not been finalised. The images you saw were fairly varied, and it's something which is quite a, well, when this application was submitted in 2018, it was quite a new idea, something to really expand that use and engagement that Councillor Marshall has referenced. So that's certainly something intended for all. And with regard to the consultation, that did the usual pre-application consultation. Since the application has been submitted, again, there's been further press releases, further information at the golf club. We've met with Harewood Parish Council, presented to the Parish Council there. That covers this site, and there was no objections raised from the Parish Council in that respect.
Want to come back, Nicole?
Please, Chair, yeah. Can you just clarify, is that within the last 4 years? Sorry, answer, is that within the last 4 years, the question?
The presentation to the Parish Council, I'm just trying to recall the last. I thought it was post-submission, and I'll just double check. I'll try and find out. Now I've got the statement of community involvement here. I thought it was, but I'll just double check.
Whilst it's checking, I just want to answer the questions about how would we ensure that we do what we say what we would do. Did you say that, Councillor? Yeah. So we have agreed to have an oversight committee on which I am going to chair. And basically, I want to ensure that we hold the organisation accountable in all the deliverables and what they say they're going to do. So I'll be chairing that committee going forward. Thank you.
So have we got the information, or shall I move on while you're looking at it? Yeah, okay. So I do have Councillors Anderson, Smith and Lamb, and I have to apologise to you that I didn't see which order you put your hands up in. Do you mind if I take you in the order I wrote you down? Okay. Councillor Anderson.
Number of points. One is, I'm not satisfied with your answer on consultation. Not satisfied at all with that. Or you might have even said just now, well, yes, we will consult. That would have even been one way out of it, but you didn't even come up with that. But the questions, two questions. One, you've submitted a large application here today with a number of different facets to it. What would you be willing to break bulk, as I call it, to try and get this more manageable? Because the lodges are one thing totally different from adventure golf and various other things. So I think, what's your view on that? And then the final thing is, did you submit a highways assessment? And if you did, and because you don't know what your adventure playground is going to be like, how were you able to account for the number of people that would then be attracted to it? Because if it's children, fine, there'll be a finite, there'll be a number of people that will come with that. If it's attractive to all human beings in the planet, then all of a sudden the number of potential people who are going to be traveling in the area increase exponentially. So how did you manage to submit your highways plan if you didn't know the fine detail on where you were going with that?
With regard to the highways submission, that the adventure golf is a very small part of the wider proposal, certainly limited number of holes it will be, and a small element of the wider scheme. Clearly the 18-hole golf course, the par 3 course, the lodges themselves been main generators. So it's a relatively small amount. The highways officer may be able to expand on the more technical side than myself. But there are assumptions that are made in transport assessment. So we submitted a detailed transport assessment that provides for a certain number of people expected at commercial uses, such as the wedding venue and the spa and the bars and restaurant and the lodges, and puts all those together and then makes those junction assessments. So I would envisage it would be an extremely small percentage associated with the adventure golf. And again, that would be in a large part, a linked trip with the other facilities on the site. And again, that was an element of the transport assessment, and then the engagement with the highways officers that formed quite a large part of discussion as to how closely linked those trips were and how they would be separated out. In terms of the breaking bulk elements, I think was the term. Yes, we're happy to continue discussions with members. Again, we presented previously, comments were made on design, the number of lodges, the makeup of the lodges, and some other elements, and we've sought to respond to that, and that's certainly something that we'd be happy to discuss further after today or during today.
On the consultation, because you've heard what the community have said, I mean, have you met with White Village? Have you, at the hamlet, have you sat down, organised a function where every single person could be invited? And if not, why not?
Yes, in the event at the clubhouse was open to all visitors. That was something that I believe was quite well attended. After the initial letter drop went out into our office, we received some letters and calls from there. And that's continued to say that I do recall, I can't find the date, but I do recall that the parish council meeting was in the last 4 years post submission. And then there's been continued wider publicity, and we would be happy to meet, of course, to engage in a constructive discussion, certainly.
To come back on that, you've made a number of amendments to the plans, which is good. You know, so don't you think it would have been good to have consulted with the local community based on the amendments that you've made? So you've listened to what's been said at the various consultation events you've had so far. Don't you think it would have made sense to have consulted with the changes that you've made as well, so that you've brought the community with you? Because it certainly sounds to me as though you've not taken the community with you. When you've made the amendments, you have changed. I'm not, you know, that's a plus point. But don't you think in retrospect, it would have been better to have kept the community involved at all stages of your journey?
That is something I always advocate to all my clients, and that has the views of the local community have been very clear in terms of their responses when they've been advertised with regard to those changes. That was very clear. The changes were made after the last presentation, and views were coming in. We read those views. We do take them on board, and where possible, we'll accommodate them. But I think you've hopefully, I think, got the idea from the reports that the views are quite clear as a no full stop. And that's where we perhaps haven't taken that further, because we didn't think that there would be such constructive engagement in that way.
Do you want to go back, Councillor Anderson, or can we? Yeah, okay. So Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask one question, get the response, and then if I may, I've got a follow-up. Thank you. So eco lodges, what makes them an eco lodge, please? Could you explain their full credentials in real terms? So the water use, the recycling of the water, traffic movement, the light pollution, the wildlife corridors, and all those lovely things, please. Thank you.
Sure. We have a sustainability consultant on board. Unfortunately, he's one of the consultants that isn't here today. And I've got their sort of crib sheet here. So using this, they reference the low and zero carbon technologies, including district heating, air and ground source heat pumps, all to become to explored, combined heat and power The eco lodges themselves, they've been designed to net zero carbon emissions, circa 700 square metres of solar PV and air source heat pumps, increased insulation and new value performance. There's the green roofs, which you'll have seen on the images. Just trying to find exact water uses. We've got BREEAM excellent ratings for the wider clubhouse and golf driving range, etc. Can't see it litres on the water, but I will just have a check in another statement as well as we talk. And just fortunately just been informed the parish council meeting I reference was December 2018 after the application was submitted.
Not to cut you out, Councillor Smith, I know you have another point that you want to, and you want the rest of the information on this question. May I ask Councillor Marshall-Catung a question while this information is being sought? Councillor Marshall-Catung, like you, I really do champion community engagement, and it's something that I think we all as councillors work towards. It's a very, very important aspect of this application. It doesn't say a huge amount in the report about how that's achieved. So could you tell us how I think it's school children that you were talking about, how do they access the club, on what basis, and what kind of transport is used for that? As a councillor for a ward elsewhere in the city, I'm particularly interested to know that.
Okay, I'll let Hanif speak on that, but I'll give you a typical example of the last one that we did. So we invited 6 different schools in the city. So schools that didn't have, when we sent out the letters, schools that didn't have transport would let us know and we arranged that. So we had Little London, we had schools from Hare Hills, Benham, Rosebank, different schools. Most schools that we invited had their own transport, but if you didn't have your own transport, the Park Lane group arranged that. So I would let Hanif let you know, because he dealt with the admin of the arrangement of how schools got to the club.
Thank you, Councillor Abigail. Good afternoon, colleagues. I did register to speak, Chair, maybe in an administrative area. If I may just elaborate, Hanif Malik, Director of the Foundation, and somebody who's been extensively involved within this city for over 25 years. Some of you know me through my work, largely as Chief Executive of the Hamara Centre. And those 25 years have primarily been involved with the voluntary and community sector. So my expertise and my passion is very much tackling inequalities at all levels, whether that's health, EDI, education, whatever that might be. When the Park Lane Foundation approached me 2 years ago to ask me if I wanted to come on board to lead the development of their foundation, my interest wasn't profit making or development of golf centres. It was very much about what was their sincerity around using the Park Lane Group and the foundation for wider good. And as Councillor Abigail has already alluded to, that's absolutely been there in 110%. And the 25 years of my experience would have very quickly shown me otherwise. I've listened with close intent to the officer's comments, and with due respect, I think what he has failed to get across are the very considerable wider community benefits that approval of this proposal would lead to. Yes, that MOU is a draft MOU, but most MOUs are until there's some more substance that you can put onto them. To bring together potentially our 3 professional sports foundations, Leeds United, as a lifelong fan, hopefully still in the Premiership next year, Leeds Rhinos, Yorkshire Cricket, Leeds Beckett University and Leeds City College, all of whom I've met both individually and collectively to come on board to widen that engagement and actually expand that initial investment of £300,000 into something much more significant, I believe is absolutely very special circumstances. This is not just about developing a salubrious environment for those who can afford it. This is about, as Councillor Abigail has said, through the work that we've been piloting. So again, I would, with apologies, have to differ that we're already doing this work. We're piloting this work, but this would allow us to expand it to a degree where it aligns itself very closely to some of the key local authority strategies that all of my respected colleagues around this table are involved with, whether that's health inequalities, whether that's continuing to contribute to the Great Ofsted report we've just received as a city. This is about allowing communities, about disadvantaged young people to attend a facility that in turn gives them a stepping stone into Leeds City College, into the Professional Sports Foundation, and gives them a second chance in life. Mr. Searle, the objector, is partly correct. Yes, this is about money, but what he fails to take into account is the correlation between the foundation and the golf club. The surplus of the profits from the golf club are to be invested in the foundation. Currently, we don't make a surplus, so the foundation is propped up by the company itself. The foundation has no intention of taking that investment for any other purpose than putting it back into use for wider community good. And I really do think that while I fully appreciate that this is Greenbelt and that you have to look at policy, there just has not been enough debate, discussion and questions on those wider benefits that this brings. I just want to finish on this point. Yes, this will be a regional golf facility, but this is not about elitism and excellence. We're not looking for the next Lee Westwood or the next Nick Faldo. This is a regional golf facility that differs from every single other golf club in our city. And let me verify that by a very recent example. We were recently approached by Zero Waste Leeds, who, as you all will be aware, do an excellent job within the city around climate change, because they're now expanding into the recycling of sports kit. And they asked us if we would be prepared to come on board. And of course, we immediately said yes. So we're partnering with them, with the RNA Golf Foundation, and with a number of schools. They finished that meeting by saying that they had approached a number of other golf clubs in the vicinity, and we were the only golf club that was receptive. And that's one example of many where we have been receptive. So this is about opening up the golf facility. It's about widening those services to the bigger community here in Leeds, and not just about some of the profit making. And it certainly is not Centre Parks. You know, I do have to object to that. I think it's a misconception that has been portrayed over the last week or two within those petitions. But I think to say this is another Centre Parks does a great disservice to those of us who are fully committed to the agenda I've just outlined.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very helpful. Are we ready with the information Councillor Smith requested on water consumption?
Yeah, I do have our sustainability statement, which refers to some finer detail in the appendices, which I can't quite get through quickly enough on my phone. But a water management strategy has been developed and is reflected within the BREEAM pre-assessment report by our sustainability consultant. It talks about current usage and refers to a 40% improvement upon that current baseline performance to meet the relevant BREEAM credits to secure BREEAM Excellent.
Like to go back, Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chair. It didn't answer any of my other things about the other credentials on the eco lodges, the traffic movement numbers, the light pollution that it will cause, or the wildlife corridors before I actually go back to my next question. But I don't think the gentleman's going to have the answers if I'm truthful. So my follow-up question is actually, in light of all the things that you say you're going to do to create these eco lodges, why then would you cause such great harm to the wider green belt with the rest of the development?
With regard to the wider credentials, that was some of the information I read out. So the eco lodges in particular, so net zero carbon emissions, the 700 square metres of solar PV associated with the scheme, an air source heat pump, the green roofs, and some of the other elements that I can read out again as you wish. In terms of the biodiversity, our biodiversity, we've done a net gain calculation, which shows an increase in what is quite a low baseline on the site. So whereas it looks green, lots of green grass, yes, it's managed, it's obviously mown every couple of days this time of year. So that actually generates quite a low baseline. And our net gain with the 300 plus trees that are been proposed to be planted lifts that significantly in addition to the further water. With regard to the light pollution, again, that's something which the sustainability consultant has looked at and does talk about it in more detail. I can try and find a little bit more on that. But primarily, the the lights that are there largely used in the clubhouse, in the driving range, are older lights, which are not the greatest piece of technology as would be today. The new golf driving range will clearly focus on focusing the lights down, the latest type of lighting facility to ensure that there isn't a light spillage. The driving range closes at 8 o'clock at night in the winter, is open until 9 o'clock at the moment, but of course there are the lights on at that time anyway.
Councillor Lamb, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a Councillor Anderson style list of things, I'm afraid. So I want to start on engagement, and I'll just ask the question, do you agree with me that development, particularly of this scale, should be done with communities, not to them? And if you agree with that, why are you doing it to them and not doing it with them? That's my first question.
Yes, I do, absolutely. Always, as I said, always advice that I give to clients and applicants. This is something where there has been the pre-application engagement, there have been open events, there have been letters and calls responded to. I took, I think, two last week in the office. Could it have been better? Yes, I think it could have been better. We went to the parish council also. That's often, again, the very typical way of being able to engage with one contact, typically the clerk at the parish council, typically to say, we would like to present to you an open meeting, invite people along, and we'll be there and answering questions, which is something which we did do. There clearly, this application has been in an awful long time. There clearly could have been more in that time. Yeah.
Okay, I'll leave that there. I'll deal with the rest of my points in one go because they all kind of tie together. So I just want to preface it by thanking Mr. Malik for what you just set out was really impressive. The aims are highly laudable. I'd be really interested to meet with you outside of the meeting and learn more about that. Councillor Marshall Catung's always impressive and passionate, but this is a planning application, and I'm bringing it back to the planning issues that we have to discuss. What I struggle to see is that there's a few issues that I wonder if you can. I was really pleased to hear that young people are accessing this facility now on a regular basis. What that tells me is you don't need to do this development to make it accessible to young people across the city. It already is. You're already doing that. So there's no special circumstance there. You could do more of that anyway. Around viability has been touched on. I know business well. There are many ways that you could close this deficit that you've got as a business and continue to do the fantastic aims that you just set out without building 35 lodges in the Greenbelt and all the things that go with it. There are lots of ways you could develop the business as it is that don't involve doing what you're setting out and doing the harm to the Greenbelt. And so as I go through, I'm struggling to see where the very special circumstance is met. And I wonder if you can help me to see what I'm missing, please.
I'll begin with that. So thank you for that, Councillor Lamb. I had the privilege of sitting on the National Sport England board for 6 years, and I also had the privilege there of chairing the Projects Committee. And one of the very key facets that's emerged from those 6 years, and National Sport England research verifies, is that engagement with young people is directly correlated to the quality of the facilities that you provide for them. So you're absolutely correct, Councillor Lamb, that we are already doing that type of work, but we're only just touching the tip of the iceberg in terms of the potential. I strongly believe that young people should not be at a disadvantage just because they reside in Hare Hills or Hyde Park or Kippax or Middleton. And so the aim to actually engage those young people with these facilities will lead, as I said earlier, to much wider tangible outcomes that go beyond just the physical landscape and environment that we're looking at today. So, as I say, we're currently attracting approximately 170 young people per week. I suppose the immediate question that may arise in all of your minds is the point that was made earlier around highways and transportation. Our pilot work with those schools and community organisations has strongly demonstrated that there's a very minimal impact on increased traffic. They tend to arrive in minibuses, so there's usually about 16 of them. We stagger the facility throughout the week, so there's never any one given time where a peak period results in very heavy traffic flow. But as I say, I do strongly believe, and based, as I say, on my 6 years experience with Sport England, having seen a whole plethora of these types of initiatives, that where you provide, and if you'll excuse the phrase, second-class facilities to our young people in this city or indeed anywhere else, then the outcomes are not sustainable. And what we're wanting to do is actually result in sustainable engagement, as I say, initially using this facility as a stepping stone, but then moving them on that, whether that's with the college or Leeds Beckett University or any of our other partners within our referral mechanism. That's the wider aim.
I think, would you accept you don't need 35 lodges, a jacuzzi and a pool to achieve all those aims?
I'm not an expert on the lodges. That's not my forte. I'd have to hand over to Andrew. But what I would absolutely accept is that without the income that the wider development brings, it doesn't give us as a foundation the level of finance that would enable us to do what we would like to do, that I've hopefully eloquently outlined.
Just one point of clarity, there isn't a swimming pool in the scheme. There is the small spa area, but not a swimming pool. Again, all sought to be ancillary to the wider operation of the club use and hopefully improving that business. Again, I'm not a businessman, but I'm sure there are various ways. This is one which has been sought to provide the facilities that helps facilitate the community engagement. The number of lodges, could it be a different number? Yes, quite possibly. I'm sure it could. It's something where, again, it's trying to provide that regional attraction, not just for this golf centre, but the others in that North Leeds green belt, that's green golf belt that's been mentioned. Again, there's some other fantastic courses in the area which do not have their own accommodation, have sought to try and do stay and play type offerings for tourist golf, but it hasn't worked because there haven't been the appropriate places to stay. So this is one about, yes, providing that lodge accommodation of a certain number. What is that right number? But to help with the golf courses as well as all the facilities on this site as well.
Do you have more questions, Councillor? You leave it there. Okay. Councillor Flint, please.
Thank you. I think Councillor Lamb covered my main questions, but just again about the how we justify the economic benefit. I don't know if I can ask, but we've been given the figure £120,000 a year deficit. I wonder if I could ask, like, how many years or how long has that been a deficit? Is it to do with COVID? And is it something that would kind of rebalance? Because I guess most businesses, have experienced a deficit after the last couple of years. And then just a question about trees, like when we were there today, in the area where the lodges will be built, it's clear that some trees will be lost. And I know that you said there would be a net gain, but there's some well-established trees there, and just appreciate more information about how many trees would be lost. Thank you.
There are 13 trees proposed to be removed, of which some of those are for health reasons, and our tree report actually recommends that removal, with a couple actually being dead at the time of writing. That was 2017. 300 is the circa number that is shown on the landscape plan as being proposed. So yes, there are some to be removed. We can clearly consider exploration of that if the number of lodges was to change. In terms of the deficit, that figure, there's a financial appraisal review and some summary financial appraisal. They were from 2020, if I remember rightly, so they were slightly after the submission. So those figures were pre-COVID, based on pre-COVID. Clearly, the golf course was closed for a number of months during COVID. I don't have the latest figures to hand, and there are colleagues here which will be able to expand on that if we can bring them forward.
that sufficient, Councillor Flint? Yeah. Councillor Almas, please.
Thank you, Chair. Now, whilst every planning application is obviously unique, that's why we're here. And it's quite a vague sort of terminology, the exceptional circumstances as well. Now, and I've known some of your colleagues here for years, work in the third sector and so on. My question would be, because the main, if you like, objection from the residents is with regards to it being a money-making business. Now, in terms of me being, for example, if I was a resident there in the near vicinity, how would you convince me in terms of, meeting the exceptional circumstances as a resident around? And secondly, my colleague, Councillor Catone, mentioned around engagement and all that. In terms of school kids, what sort of engagement or benefits have you got for the children, not just from this wider city, but from within, say, a couple of miles radius? Because I'm sure you would have schools within the 2 miles radius of the actual site. So as a resident, if I was a resident there living close by, how would this benefit me and outweigh, in terms of the exceptional circumstances? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Almas. If I can just pick your last point up first. We've spoken about the wider engagement across the city, but obviously we absolutely recognise that the more local engagement is also something that's very important. We do tend to attract a number of young people from the immediate vicinity, as you would expect, because it's, if you like, on their doorstep, and it's more affordable for that type of community. Andrew has already alluded to the fact that we are very keen to work more closely with that local community to not only overcome some of the objections that were raised, but to try to ensure that A, disruption is minimal, but B, that the services are complementary for those residents who reside around the club. The second point, I've had a look at the figures, not in detail, but I think the two key points which have already been made is that, one, even outside of a pandemic, golf clubs per se are not the most profitable venture. That's why a number of them continue to close. And indeed, you will all be aware that even our local municipality courses have sadly largely been closed over the last few years. So the development allows us to make a profit. At the moment, as I say, subsidised by the wider Park Lane group. But we'd be very happy to include local residents on the steering group that Councillor Kutung said that we're absolutely committed to putting in place. We want to give you the absolute reassurance that there is nothing sinister, if for want of a better phrase, in terms of this development, other than what we're putting across. And if local residents wished to partake in that decision-making process and influence the future direction of travel around how the facility operates, then absolutely, yes, we'd be very keen on that. We're not here to try and upset anybody. We take into account the golf club is situated in salubrious surroundings. I myself go play there occasionally, but it's something that's important to us, is the local engagement, and that's an offer that is very sincere and genuine on our part, as I say, to not only engage but to involve.
Could I add something here as well?
Yes, please do, Councillor.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Gohar, in terms of the children, why I was particularly concentrating on children from outside of the area is because lots of the children that live in that area, I will class them as privileged children. They go to schools around that area that have some of the facilities that are already in the golf club. And outside of that area, we have lots of children that have never seen that kind of green before. We have lots of children who do not even know what how to even play golf, not to talk about foot golf. So for me, it's trying to bridge the inequalities in our children and sports. Golf is looked upon as an elitist sport, and we're trying to let young people know that if they're given the opportunity, they also can. And that's the only reason why we're doing our best to reach out to schools that are outside that area and bring children from deprived areas into those areas and let them know how far their imagination, and that there's the opportunity for them to learn a different sport that they're not used to seeing in their own schools.
Thank you. Would you like to come back, Councillor Almas?
And the follow-up to that would be in terms of the actual sustainability. So, for example, if the outcome is today is not in favor of your application, what implications would you have in terms of the actual day-to-day running or to the organization? I'd be interested to find that out, please.
So there's two elements to that, Councillor Almas. The first is the golf club itself, and as I don't directly get involved with the operations and the running of the golf club, the information I have seen leads me to respond to your question by saying it's unsustainable in the longer term. And as I just mentioned a few minutes earlier, there's lots of national research that verifies that is the case for most golf clubs, other than those that are member-only golf clubs in places like Alwoodley and Moortown that have the privilege of a membership that can afford membership fees that unfortunately we cannot. As far as the foundation is concerned, the foundation will continue, but sadly it would only be able to deliver a fraction of what is possible if this was approved. Again, we're very happy to commit into an agreement of whatever would be acceptable to colleagues around this table around that financial commitment from the proceeds of the golf club for it to go directly to the foundation and in turn to the wider causes that we've spoken about this afternoon.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. So I've listened to the debate and I'm very behind, but I'm fully behind everything you've said in terms of giving all children opportunities that they wouldn't ordinarily receive. So going back to the application, I'm a little bit puzzled if you really want to go down the play and stay golf route and ensure the club's sustainable future. Why you've gone for a spa instead of hotel rooms, because then you wouldn't need the eco lodges, which would mean that you wouldn't need as much investment and probably wouldn't cause as much upset in the community or damage to the environment. So whilst I'm absolutely not changing your application in any way, I just would like to explore the reasoning behind that, if I may, please. Thank you.
I suppose I can expand in that the spa is quite a small, physically, a small piece of the development. That you wouldn't provide anywhere near the number of rooms that would be required again to make something as a stay and play offer viable. There would be just a handful of bedrooms, I think, and almost individual bedrooms. That's where the lodges offer more in that sense, more in quantum and a different type of accommodation. And I think it's put on the basis of a lot of golf holidays that can be with societies where a number of people going together, half a dozen people going away, and can stay in those lodges where you have the element of going back and relaxing into that accommodation of an evening, not just literally sleeping and going downstairs for every single meal and every single thing on the golf course. It was also considered for wider families as well. Somebody coming to the area and playing golf, part of the group playing, the others going off to visit other tourist sites or playing the adventure golf as well. So it was to have larger and more comfortable accommodation as well was certainly a lot of the thinking behind the business plan from the outset.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, my question is around the revenue really and the financial viability. It sounds as if the drop in revenue has been over a period of time, so it's not just a direct effect of COVID. And I just wondered what the main reasons were for that, if you could expand on it. If one of those, and I'm assuming membership probably has a big part to play in that, has any work been done around looking at the membership and changes there? Because you mentioned that some of the other local golf clubs were more successful because of the way their membership was set up. So has any work been done around that first, just to see whether that's an option, rather than go for the, obviously the larger impact on the green belt? Thank you.
If I can just respond to that initially, I think if I'm maybe a little bit more frank in terms of what I was saying earlier, is that they just charge much higher levels of membership because they operate within environments where the local community and their members can afford those types of fees. We deliberately attempt to be an affordable and accessible facility. So the first part is that by increasing our fees, we would deter a number of our members who are able to play. The second thing that we attempt to do is, rather than just focus on running it as a fully commercial operation, which, as I say, would replicate what most of the golf clubs do, where it's just about members and charging the highest possible levy you can. We attempt, as I said, to ensure that we've got more of a balance between members, people who can just simply turn up and play, and then the use that's subsidised for younger children, schools and community organisations. As I say, I'm not somebody who's got a commercial background, but I would imagine just to turn it into another golf facility would be possible. But that's not the desire or the intention of the Partling Group, or indeed the foundation that I head up, because it then just becomes, as I say, another facility that becomes inaccessible to large numbers of not only young people, but communities. And Councillor Abigail earlier alluded to the fact that it's about playing golf. Yes, it is, but actually allowing them to access such a facility opens up doors into lots of other areas of health, well-being and physical activity. And we've seen that through some of the pilot work that we've undertaken.
Is that sufficient information?
If I could go back, please.
Yes.
I was just wondering, you mentioned that other clubs obviously increase the fees to make them viable. Has anyone looked at reducing fees to have a bigger membership, or is the club at capacity in terms of membership, but obviously you're not able to therefore open it up and you're having to deal with the pricing that you have already?
So one of the ironies and very, very, very few upsides of the pandemic was that golf clubs actually increased their membership and became busier, largely because they were one of the few facilities that the government allowed access to when most of the facilities were, particularly the indoors one, were closed. But that short-term upward trajectory is not something that's sustainable longer term. It's a very fine balance, Councillor, between trying to raise fees, lower them and get them somewhere right in the middle. Golf's slightly unique in terms of the way its membership is set up. The reduction in fees, I couldn't say for definite we've looked at, but again, from the work that we've undertaken so far, wouldn't lead to the sustainable levels that we're seeking. There is a situation that we're already facing where it's subsidised to the extent of 6 figures by the parent body. That subsidy wouldn't be made up by reducing the fees and trying to engage the wider volume. The ratio is just not there in terms of the capacity that's available to engage. It's not, if I can give you an analogy, it's not like a gym where they put something up at $9.99 and try to attract several thousand members, most of whom don't use the gym like myself, but still keep the direct debit. It's a different operating model. Do you want to add something, Andrew?
Okay. Any further questions? Councillor Anderson.
Just before we go into questions with officers, can you just confirm, I accept you've not got them on you, but to the best of your knowledge, you have provided information to our officers to satisfy policies EN1 and EN2 and the whole life carbon costs. To the best of your knowledge, that has already been passed to the officers, so the officers should be able to answer the question.
Yes, the scheme is policy compliant. There's a 46, I think it was, page sustainability statement. As I've got the summary here. Yes.
Thank you. I think that brings us to the close of questions to the speakers. So thank you very much indeed, all three of you, for joining us. It may be that we call you back for further questions if we need to during the debate. So thank you for that. And members will take questions to officers, and then I'll suggest a 5-minute comfort break before we go to the debate. Are there questions to officers, please?
Do you want me to pick up on the?
Yes, please, Steve.
Can I just respond to Councillor Anderson's point on the climate change policies to start with? I think we've covered these in paragraphs 129 and 130, where we've considered the development. It's a major development, so developments of that scale need to meet the carbon reduction targets and the renewable energy requirements, and the EN2, which is meeting the BREEAM excellent standard. And as Andrew, the agent, pointed out, I have submitted one of the key changes since when it came from as a position statement to determination now is they've done quite a lot more work on the sustainability elements, and they've actually produced a document showing how they're going to meet these elements. And in particular, they've had BREEAM do their initial assessments that have come back saying, yes, it can achieve these excellent standards, and then they're going for the net zero carbon as well, whereas our requirement at the moment is 20% above Part L building regs, whereas that'd be a few steps above that.
What I accept that explanation, and that and I can probe that further, but what about the whole life costs of the carbon? Because you've got the carbon cost of building it. I mean, what it is, the reason I'm asking the question is because we're after special circumstances in order to justify development in the green belt. I would have thought we need to satisfy ourselves that this development meets our climate change initiatives that we've come forward with as a council, and that we are making sure that there will be no carbon problems further down the line. So how can we get reassurance on the whole carbon cost of the transport, driving back and forth, because there's no public transport, so that means there must be a carbon cost on a daily basis of people moving back and forth. I mean, they're not going to be using electric cars. I don't care what anybody says, they're not going to be using electric cars. And if we're getting more buses to come and bring school children in, these will all add to the carbon footprint. How can we get reassurance that the whole life carbon costs have been taken into account in terms of our judgment we make today?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of the policy requirements, we can only ask them as the very basic to meet the requirements as stated in the development plan. But in terms of issues such as transport, such as you raised, such as the BREEAM assessment, that's multifaceted, so it looks at lots of elements, and transport forms part of that. So to get that excellent rating, I think transport, when I read it earlier at lunch, I think it's about 10 or 11% of the overall picture. They've got to go so far from the baseline to meet that element. So we'll also put conditions on verification reports to ensure that the buildings, if and when they're built, are of the standard that they say they're going to be. Because obviously a lot of it is potentially looking at what solutions can be put forward to meet these elements, whereas we need to ensure that the final buildings meet these. And BREEAM offer a accreditation system, which we traditionally condition as part of applications like this.
I do note your request, Councillor Lamb. I think David wants to say something at this point.
Yes, just maybe my misunderstanding of the question, Councillor Anderson, but I don't think we can go as far as you wish us to in terms of future-proofing it. Yeah, it's the points made in the report that it's not a sustainable location.
Yeah, all I'm trying to make is special circumstances to apply within my mind. I need to be satisfied that the environmental cost is worth the other benefits that are going to accrue as a result of that, and set one off. In my mind, balance them out or see which side of the argument I come down on.
Do you want to address the viability point at the same time?
Just before the other questions come, there was the officer comments on the viability stuff. So I'll just give some headline comments on that. I mean, you know, the agent said that it wasn't a viability study as such, and I've just looked back at the information. They've called it a financial appraisal review and a feasibility study on the effect of profitability. I mean, I think it's pretty similar to what we'd expect a viability statement to be. Unfortunately, it's confidential in nature, but some of the, you know, roundabout elements, you know, that talk about things that are in the public domain, like the substantial increase in losses, but these aren't specified within that document. So we've talked about figures. I think it started at 100k and then 120, and I'm sure I heard 200,000 mentioned today, but we don't have these. We're taking these at face value almost, which as planners we don't like to do. We want that robust evidence there to be able to justify these. And yeah, I think it's also in the public domain in newspaper articles and stuff that it's going to have a construction value of about 21 million, and then out of that there's going to be the 300k community fund. So it seems like a lot of money for that benefit, and we don't know what happens when that fund runs out. So you know, we haven't really seen any significant costings, and the document itself says costs included within this feasibility study are pure estimates at this stage, but can be refined later when tenders come in. So in terms of the greenbelt impact and getting to the stage where we think this development's required to meet these benefits, I don't think we know where we are on the line, basically, where we'd need to be to balance the greenbelt harm with a viable business. So that's the tipping point argument. And then going on to let's keep going. Yeah, so I mean, although there's an argument there that it's not a viability assessment, I think for something of this scale, if they're looking to put forward arguments like that, that's something we'd want. And there is national guidance on it, which talks about it being proportionate, simple and transparent and publicly available. And in particular, the transparency in making it publicly available, the government put a significant weight to this, because they want us to think over time this will improve the data available for future assessments, and it offers more accountability to the process. So, you know, things like looking at gross development value, land values, landowner premiums and developer returns, we haven't seen information such as that. It was basically a simple one-page Excel document with the costings, and we're having to take a lot of it at face value, as I said, and this mechanism, having the mechanism in place to direct these profits to these community benefits, we're not sure what that is and if it's achievable from a planning sense, because we're obviously tied to it all being linked, and how this can be achieved in perpetuity, I suppose. So, you know, what happens if we have this link in place and then the profitability of the club improves through increased membership or whatever in the future, which a lot of these things we can't control as planners traditionally, and I haven't seen a mechanism in place to help us do that link. And then I suppose the final point would be on the community work. I mean, you know, it's fantastic the things that we hear that they're doing, and you know, we'd certainly welcome that, but we don't have any costings for this community work. We don't know how much community work can be done for 100,000, how much can be done for 1 million, blah blah blah, and how proportionate this is to the profits moving forward. But I suppose, you know, the key element is linking that money back to this community work, which we haven't seen anything for at the moment.
Okay, Councillor Brooks, that does cover some of your earlier questions. I'm sure you've got another one.
I do. In terms of the viability of the club, were employee figures included in that?
We can have it. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, it's we've got nothing in the figures to show the existing like profitability of a club, so that'd include things like staff costs, wouldn't it, and other aspects like this. This is all, it's all looking forward to looking at construction values, contingencies, planning fees, stuff like that, which you know, there was that caveat on there that they're estimates anyway, you know, without going out to tender. So we don't know what the baseline is. We've heard the baseline of these losses at around £100,000, which there could well be, but we don't know the details behind it.
Okay, I think that concludes questions to officers, unless anyone has another one. Oh, two. Councillor Lamb, then Councillor Smith, and was the one on this side as well? No.
Thank you, Chair. No, well, I'm almost ready to go into comments, to be honest, but it was a suggestion really that we focus questions on very special circumstances, because there's no point getting into the detail of the application if we're not there on that. And I have to be honest, myself, I started 50-50 on this, and the presentation we've just heard has moved me firmly to thinking very special circumstances do not in any way exist. They've talked me out of it, if I'm honest. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. You've covered viability, so I've got some comments. I think we've covered climate emergency. I'm struggling to see why this would have to be in this place. I think I think I probably am.
For the recording, I think Councillor Lamb's comments there are starting the debate. So if yours is a question, Councillor Anderson, I'll take it now.
His assessment, have we, you know, in terms of the traffic movements, on if they're very successful, partially successful, if it's just children only, I mean, was that included in the assessment that was done?
So the assessment that was done was looking at the existing traffic generation compared to the predicted, but most of that was based on, you know, sort of comparable sites and assumptions. You know, we have a database of trips that we use, developers use them in assessment, and we also have, you know, have that information as well, which often is how we generate the existing trips based on a use, a comparable use in a comparable location, and then look at the proposed use and the trip generation that would arise from that. And the officers who did the, you know, looked at what the information that was submitted, you know, his comments did say that the overall trip generation that he accepted was considered a robust assessment. So that sort of, he was considering that as sort of the worst case scenario, sort of you know, looking at the predicted, the proposed use and the predicted traffic generation, but also that was very much looking at the peak hours, peak AM hour, peak PM hours, and then a peak weekend time, which is generally Saturday lunchtime. And the additional trip generation that, you know, sort of was accepted in that assessment was an additional 18 two-way trips in the AM peak, which is like sort of 9 in, 9 out, an additional 61 in the PM peak, so that's 30 in, 30 out in the weekdays, and an additional 70 weekend peak trips, that's two-way trips, so 39 in, 39 out. The existing sort of trip generation, so that's possibly an additional 50% on the existing for the AM week peaks, and perhaps just over double the number in the PM peak from the existing, and again 75% of the existing in the Saturday lunchtime peak. Does that make sense?
So what you're saying is that with improved par 3 facilities, improved foot golf facilities, massive increase in the practice facilities in terms of the 2 levels, and the lodges, you're saying that that's only about no more than 100 trips? Is that roughly what you're saying to me?
Because what we're saying is that in the peak hours,
Yeah.
there's an additional trip, but it's not looking, we haven't looked at across the whole day, because in terms of the impact on the network, the major impact is on those peak hours where you've got more trips on the network anyway, where we then look at the junctions and the traffic movements through
Right,
those
I'll leave
junctions.
the part to debate. The final question is, are you saying on behalf of highways that this increased volume of traffic, the roads are wide enough, are safe enough to be able to take that?
In terms of the local junctions, they were all assessed and were judged to have sufficient capacity to deal with the additional traffic. There are passing places on School Lane, and again, it was assessed that the additional traffic, there was sufficient capacity there to deal with it. There is some accident concerns, in particular at the Tarn Lane Coal Road junction, but there's very limited work that can be done there, but we did ask for a contribution to potentially look at, some additional measures. There's been a new signing and lining at that junction, but overall the assessment was that it wouldn't have a significant severe impact on the safety or the operation of the network.
So for my final question is, you were with us when we went out by bus last time, and the driver took us up a wonderful road which caused all sorts of mayhem. Why is that not going to occur more regularly if this development goes ahead?
I would basically say I wouldn't have chosen to drive that way, and that would not be a way that I would assume that say local schools would travel to the club. It wasn't the most direct way either.
He was quite a qualified driver that took us, to be quite frank.
Yeah,
I mean,
but I have to say, Councillor Anderson, it was not the most direct or the
no,
most
no,
sensible
no.
route.
But that's the point
And
I was trying to make.
and
Okay,
sensible
I've made my
routes.
point
Right.
about.
Councillor Lamb, did you have a question?
I have a question, Chair, because following from that, something doesn't add up here. So if the traffic assumptions are correct, then there's no way on God's earth you're going to spend £21 million and generate enough revenue back to make the new scheme viable. And if the new scheme is going to be viable, then there's no way the traffic assumptions are correct. One of those things is not right.
Okay.
Which one?
Which one is the question?
All I can go on is what the assessment was based on those hours, the peak hours, traffic hours. It wasn't looking at the whole day or the evening. So I think perhaps a more full assessment would take into all those numbers. Or for instance, if there's a big function, for instance, which would be in the evening. But because there's less other traffic on the network at those times, we tend to only look at the peak hours when we're doing that assessment. So that the evening traffic may be more an amenity impact rather than an actual traffic impact in terms of operation of network.
I think that's as far as we're going to get on a response to your question at this point. So
my question, in those vehicular movements figures, do they account for the service vehicles and the increase in service vehicles that will be needed?
Shortly, yes, they should take account of the service vehicles, and there was looking at the vehicle movers manoeuvres into the site to make sure that servicing would function safely.
Thank you. So yeah, sorry, Chair. That's even worse then, because that means they're virtually all going to be service movements and no very few actual car movements in those increases.
What I would say is that often the servicing wouldn't be at those times.
David is going to be offering us a suggestion.
Just picking up on the concerns that members have, there's a number of ways that we can deal with it. If members after the debate come to the view to resolve planning permission, then what we can do is listen to members' concerns. We can reassess the highway assessment and see if there is an additional ground for refusal to add as part of reassessment, and we'll consult with Lisa and consult with the chair and pass that through the chair. If members come to a deferral, of course, again, we could carry out, reevaluate that exercise. If members get to the position where they want to resolve to not accept the officer recommendation and approval, well, we'll be bringing a report back in any event for that, and we can do the same there. So we can address it through that way.
Alan? No, we're not. We're going to have a 5-minute break and then we're on to the debate.
I was going to suggest that potentially it could be a bit quicker than needing a 5-minute break.
Okay.
I personally would be happy to move the officer recommendation.
Well, I would just like to position the debate first before you do that, if that's okay, because we're looking at an application which is in the green belt. So there are two things that we have to consider. First is whether there are special circumstances or not, based on the information that's been placed in front of us. And secondly, there are aspects, as I understand it, of this application which are acceptable in the green belt, and we may wish to indicate that we would be happy for those aspects to go ahead. So I felt the debate needed to follow those two strands. That's fine. Carry on, Alan.
No, I respect you enormously as chair, and I'm more than happy to go along with that.
So on that request, then we'll forego the break and we'll go straight into comments. Do we have comments, please? Okay, 5 minutes then and straight back. Okay, thank you for coming back so promptly, members. We can now go into the debate, and I invite comments from anyone who would like to make them, please. Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think my comments would be that the bar for greenbelt development is rightly set very, very high. I don't feel that in any way we've got close to being given evidence of very special circumstances being met. It doesn't mean there is no development that would ever be appropriate here. There's lots of things I like about the scheme, but that test for me for very special circumstances would partly there's not enough information. I think the lack of consultation engagement is disappointing, and so I'd urge the applicants to go and really engage with the local community and look at something that I don't believe you have to go to this scale to make it viable personally, but something smaller. So as I alluded to earlier, I'd move the office of recommendation on that basis.
Well, I think before we sent the developer back to sort of communicate further with the community and consult on a scheme, we would need to be satisfied that we would be prepared to consider a scaled down scheme or some aspect of that scheme, rather than put them to all that trouble and work and have them back and go through the same process again. So I think we would have to reach some sort of in principle agreement, not that we definitely would approve what came back, but that we would be open-minded enough, given the very strong views and the very high bar about the green belt, that it would be worth their while doing a lot more work. We'd have to be clear about that. I mean, for example, Councillor Lamb, are you clear about that you would be open-minded enough to consider it? And what about other colleagues around the table?
Yes, because I can see a lot of benefits to developing the site. The lodges bother me immensely. I think that's a step way too far. But in terms of actually developing around the current building area and so on, I think there is something that could be done within that.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with my colleague, Councillor Lamb. In many ways, this scheme is great. I think it's admirable what they're trying to do, and the fact that they're trying to secure the future of the club and bring some wider community use into the club. It's to be applauded, but I don't think they need to spend 21 million on a development of this scale in the green belt to achieve that. Perhaps a smaller expansion of the clubhouse itself, the driving range, double-deck driving range. I don't see a problem with that, providing the lighting was sympathetic to the green belt. I don't like the lodges at all. I think that that's completely unnecessary. I understand that they want the play and stay golf, but surely there are other ways that can be achieved in the local area. I don't mind if they brought an application forward for adventure golf, and we could look at that in its own right, because we haven't actually been given very many details of that at all here today. And the changing of the golf course itself, I'm not against that in its entirety. To me, I think it's just it's almost too big a project in one go, and I don't think it's necessary to be that big to make the club viable and for them to achieve what they have told us today that they're setting out to achieve. Thank you.
For me, some of the issues that have come out of the earlier questioning around community involvement and enhancement and reaching out to other parts of the city have been stated much more clearly and than previously. And I did mention earlier on I don't feel that came sufficiently clearly out of the report at the point at which we were receiving information. And perhaps all of us need to understand better the balance between the community impact, which for me is an invaluable part of this project, and the necessity to develop exactly what's in front of us, or a version of that, or less of that, or whatever it might be. I feel that community strand really hasn't been emphasised explicitly enough in the information that we've received so far. Councillor Flint, and then Kaylee.
Yeah, I just think to add to that, I'd like to see kind of figures around how many children and young people they're working with already, and as a result of the scheme being implemented, how that would increase. Because it's all just sort of vague, and it'd be good to know the sort of actual figure they would hope to reach, because of course that's really admirable part of what their work they're doing.
Yeah, before I bring Councillor Brooks in, I agree with that point. And I think what's important for us to understand, particularly when we're trying to judge special circumstances, is the additionality that will occur in pretty exact terms, really, pretty quantified terms, the additionality that will occur as a result of this. And I think the feeling I'm getting from around the table is there probably doesn't need to be all of this to achieve that additionality. And it's just the way of thinking. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you. I was going to say something similar with regards to the sort of community benefits and the citywide benefits. I think that's quite clear, but having some numbers would be really helpful in future to back up that assertion. And also in terms of the viability of the club, as said before, it really is a very high bar. Really is a very, very high bar for developing on Greenbelt. So economic impact would be one of those things in terms of if the club had to close. I would have hoped to have seen what the impact of that would have been on job losses and similar. As well as the loss of that that wider community benefit, because obviously in more rural settings there are fewer jobs. So it's quite important to preserve those jobs. I think in terms of what would be acceptable and what wouldn't be, it's quite clear that holiday lodges are not acceptable. Holiday accommodation is not permitted within the Greenbelt. There's two policies on that, I believe. Yeah, so like that needs to just be forgotten about entirely. I rather disagree that a sort of fun golf course goes against what the principles of keeping the Greenbelt open. I think that it'd be possible to do a sympathetic, I guess, crazy golf course. You can't have crazy golf unless it's crazy, can you? But yeah, but you'd be able to keep the openness of the Greenbelt, I feel, and it absolutely does fit in with sports provision on the Greenbelt, in my view. It's a sort of gateway drug, isn't it? So yeah, certainly we can look at it again. I don't think anyone's saying absolute no to everything.
In terms of the lodges, I totally accept what people have said, that we are struggling to understand why the lodges are necessary to make certain things happen. I do want to say one thing though, because I always comment on design whenever we look at anything. And actually, I think these lodges are really well designed. I think they are sympathetic with the landscape. I think they bring the outside in really well. I like the green roofs and I like the zero carbon credentials. I actually think they are lovely lodges. But at the moment, they are completely against our Greenbelt policy. I do need to point out that that policy is very old, and that other authorities, other planning authorities have different versions of that, which do actually allow some things like glamping, which at the moment we're turning down because of that policy. So maybe it needs to be revisited in some way, and those lodges would be really welcomed, in my view, elsewhere in a different scheme, or perhaps much reduced. But I just, oh, sorry, Councillor Flint, you come in.
No, I think it's the number, isn't it? If the village only has 30, is it 32 dwellings, and then there's 35 houses built, it just seems crazy to sort of double the size of buildings in such a little village. So yeah, they're lovely, but it's the wrong place and the wrong amount, I think, of them. That's kind of what I would comment on the lodges.
Thank you. Any further comments? Yes, Councillor Anderson.
I do think the equal units are just a little bit too far. Personally, I can see a potential development of the clubhouse, whether extensively as it's proposed, I would question. No problem with the relocation of the 9-hole golf course. No problem with the 3 par 3 course, the foot golf course. No problem. The driving range, well, we need to be just satisfied that the 2 floors aren't going to have too much light pollution, but we did hear that they were going to try and have the lights pointing downwards, so fine if we can get satisfaction on that. And the adventure golf course, well, it'd be interesting to see what the split and usage is going to be. But I do have concerns about the highways. I mean, trying to drive around those roads is very, very difficult. And if we're increasing the number of people who are in the area, we need to make sure what we're doing to try and help it. There is no public transport nearby. Some of the other courses that do have, that we are talking about in the area, you can access public transport, but then maybe use some other facility to get to the course. If we're having events at night, there will need to be movement of taxis, unless we're going to start suddenly supporting drinking and driving, which I don't think we are in any way suggesting. So you are going to need taxis to get people to and from. If we increase the number of vehicles going from schools, which again, I support what they're doing, the chances are these will be buses, which will take up road space, physical space. They probably will be electric buses, so from that point of view, sustainable. But I'm also not totally happy with that I've not got information on the whole of life costs, carbon costs either, in order to make the decision. And in terms of the viability information, yes, okay, a lot of it might be confidential, but we could get it in confidential papers, and provided we authorize ourselves properly, we can then go beneath the line, discuss that information, not in public session, and it would help some people to probably understand a number of the questions that have been raised today. If we actually saw the information, we might be able to do it. Now, except that the officer's got it, and based on what the officer has told us, I think there is enough evidence to say that there are questions that we would probably ask if we did see the detail of it. So it's a pity the developers didn't decide to try and split things up. After if they'd consulted with local residents, they would have probably been given a hint that if they break this application up into smaller parcels, they might stand a chance of getting it if they'd actually consulted. And because they didn't consult, they're in a position of all or nothing today. And if they had actually listened to the local community, they might have been able to take out some of these other things, got permission for those, and it looks as though they're going to lose the whole thing as a result of them not consulting properly and not getting buy-in from the community to certain aspects of this. And so it does seem a pity, but I think I will have to reluctantly support the officer recommendations, because we've not got a suggestion from the developers that they're willing to break bulk, as I call it, and try and get some of the parts of the scheme that are acceptable in my eye approved today.
I believe a very similar issue arose on site this morning. Was it in discussion with Councillor Flint? I can't remember, but bite-sized chunks were considered. Oh, it was you, sorry, Trish, not giving credit to the right person, but yes. So that is another option that the developer might wish to pursue. Councillor Almas.
Thank you, Chair. I quite agree with my colleagues. It's one of those things I really appreciate and understand some of the concerns raised by the residents. It's one of those situations when you look at the argument from the other side, it's the 9 and the 6, whichever side you look at it from. But I think in terms of the eco lodges, it's a great idea. I only wish these kind of lodges were built elsewhere and people would replicate such environmentally friendly construction as well. However, I think at the end of the day, I think the organization and the whole team needs to engage more with the local community, take them, and listen to them, and have more, if you like, engagement with the local community, so that moving forward, if they do have other plans, look at those plans which probably might get more support, because we've got, looking at the objections and the documents in support, they're pretty much in balance at the moment. It's about 92 and 93 or something like that, objections and support letters. So yeah, it would be good to see more engagement, I would say, from the developers with the local residents, and then probably come back with exceptional circumstances, explain more to the committee and my members. Thank you.
Well, I can see nods around the table. So, Councillor Lamb, would you like to make your proposal again?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would, with all of the comments that we've put, move that we support the officer recommendation.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Smith, all those in favour? So that is unanimous, I think. Yes. Thank you very much. So this application has actually been approved because we're approving the recommendation, if you see what I mean, which is to refuse it. Hopefully the developers and their advisors will have gleaned enough from our discussion this afternoon to be able to know how they can progress best with this particular proposal. Thank you all very much for coming and for spending the afternoon